Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Worlds Apart, Words Together, where best friends share laughter, stories, and an unbreakable bond. And I'm here with my bestie, Leah. Welcome, Leah.
Yes, welcome. We're back
We are back with
for
another
yet
week.
another week. And this week, well, it's stressful, but
Yeah, just like every other week. So it's literally the
it
same.
will be a surprising episode the day we say, oh, it's not been stressful.
We're actually feeling so relaxed. By that, you gotta be worried.
Yeah,
I think by that time we've just given up.
yeah, you've really given up. But yeah, so this is a good topic today that we're kind of going off of unexpectedly, unknowingly, kind of flowing off of last week.
Yeah, very true. And
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say. So last week we kind of talked about 8 habits to forming solid, healthy adult relationships, or post college life relationships. And now this week we're gonna dive in a little bit into the healthy boundaries and setting them,
Yeah.
and what it means to set them, and how to set them, and
And
why they're
what
important.
they are, why it is important to have boundaries, and what you can gain from setting those boundaries.
Yeah.
So I'll start us off by something that is very important. I think as we talk about self growth and just this process of going from teenage years to college years to adulthood and being young adults, and we're constantly growing, I think being self aware is kind of the foundation of a lot of these things. As you get older, you start to understand yourself better. At least that's what we hope that it happens over time. And for some people that happens a little later, for some people a little earlier. But over time, you start to get to know yourself better, and that is really also the foundation of setting boundaries by knowing what it is that you find important, and kind of that's the building block for the next steps in that.
Yeah, definitely. In order to know what your boundaries are, why you would even need them, how to even put them out, you have to take time to figure out what your own needs are, what your own values are, and what your own limitations are. Because there's only, I get reminded this daily, there's only 24 hours in a day. And there's only 7 days in a week. Now, I like to squeeze 36 hours in the 24 hours, but there is only 24 hours in a day. So you need to know what your limits are. What 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 is a priority, what can wait for the next day, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And you got to, once you kind of know what those are, you got to be able to define them in for yourself. Like, define them
Yeah.
and say this is why, and give a reason why. So when your evil brain over here on this side says, "Oh no, you can do this," your good brain says, "Oh, remember why we have to do blah blah blah." Good and evil. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to understand and know why you're doing what you're doing, and definitely cultivate that self awareness around it.
Yeah. And also to kind of hone in on that, understanding what it is kind of ties into being like self worthiness, like knowing your worth.
Hmm.
Um, let's say in a workplace where you feel like, yeah, I mean, you kind of eventually stepped up and said, no, this I'm not taking this anymore. That's setting a boundary for yourself, being like, hey, this is my limit, no more. Maybe I would have liked to see it happen sooner, but like that was your boundary and you took that step. And that is also something that in other workplaces, it is important for you to understand like you are not obligated to do those things if they're not part of what you sign up for. One example I once had a job and this man asked me if I could come to work. And I said, I can, but I have to leave at noon because I have to go pick up important documents and I need to travel for that. Um, he was like, okay, that's fine. So at noon, I left and I couldn't finish the work that I was doing. And then the customers got upset because I wasn't there anymore. So they had to close like the cafeteria or whatever. And then my boss got upset at me. And I said, well, I told you I have to leave at noon. And I left at noon. So this is not my fault. You didn't get any backup or got anyone else who could cover for me. So this really isn't on me. Like I came in for you to help you and I set my boundary at noon. Um, so that's just a little personal experience that I've had.
Yeah, I think it definitely, we use work as an example because in today's world, people, or at least in the US, let's rephrase, you overwork. You work tends to come first for most people. Um, and so it's just the easiest one of like work life balance. Like if you're not ex- if you're chronically being expected to do more than what you're being paid for or you're being recognized for, then you need to set your boundary and not do more.
Yeah.
Um, but that it also is boundaries with relationships, boundaries with friendships. Like it goes beyond just work. Work is just the easiest example.
Yeah. I mean, same with friendships, like kind of tying into our topic from last week on how to maintain and build adult relationships or friendships. And I think knowing when to, set the limit of like, okay, yes, we can be in contact and we can be friends, but don't expect me to be able to hang out with you every single minute of every single day. And being able to tell yourself that if like, I want to set my limit to hanging out once a week or once a month. Um, that way you have that priority or that idea for yourself, and then it's also easier to follow through with that. I think if you don't really set those certain boundaries or certain plans for yourself, that it's a lot easier to fall into that, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go anyway, even though you really don't want to, because you
Yeah,
feel
and
obligated to.
yeah, and that's a good way to kind of like go transition into kind of like the next um part of setting boundaries, or the next step is once you've identified what your boundaries should consist of and why, you communicate them to yourself so you have a good understanding. But then you have to understand when and be comfortable with saying yes and no to certain situations. More times than not, we always say yes, more often than we ever say no. But learning to say no is very important part of setting healthy boundaries, because no is not necessarily a rejection. Um,
Not a permanent rejection, at
yeah, it's
least.
not a it's just saying like right now, no, I can't take this on, or right now, no, I can't put additional effort and time into this thing
Yeah.
because I'm already stretched thin, or I've already made different arrangements, or I've already said this, or I've already committed to something. So it's learning to balance the no's and the yeses. We'll leave it
And
like that.
even if that commitment that commitment that you already have is sitting on the couch all evening because you are stressed as hell and you want to just have an evening of nothing, like that is totally okay. um you shouldn't expect from yourself to always give into what other people expect from you, because they understand. They probably also say no when they don't feel like it. So,
Yeah, and it's it's like, I don't know how I want to phrase it, but like, saying no doesn't mean that ruins a relationship, or it shouldn't ruin a relationship.
no, not
It's
at
just
all.
being honest with yourself and being honest in the situation, saying that's not what I need, that's not what I can do, that's not, I can't take this on, whatever it might be, because of something else that's going on, or your energy is somewhere else. And it shouldn't boil down, and that no should not ruin your long term relationship, or your long term friendship, or whatever it might be.
I would totally agree with that, especially like we talked about last week. We get busier and busier with just life in general and just work and things that require our attention. So if you also add pressure from external pressure from situations like that where you kind of don't want to do anything, but you're kind of feeling pressure that you should, that's just too much to handle at that point, which can then even lead to more faults or flaws in that relationship or friendship than when you're just like, no, I don't really feel like this right now, like let's reschedule or let's take it another day, but right now I need to not do or not hang out or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think it also is important to note vice versa. Like, we're saying no, don't go out, no, don't hang out, but it can go vice versa. You can say no to homework. Like, if you're cram,
Yeah.
like if you've been drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled for 8 weeks straight, and you just want to have a night or a Saturday or whatever, that you're doing nothing, you're going out with friends or whatever it might be, you can say no to doing homework and yes to going out. So I think it's important to note, like, it does go both ways, and that's why
Yeah,
it's
for
so
sure.
essential to have that balance.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that um like I came to realize a few weeks ago when we were also talking about self-growth a lot, is that I felt the need to really sit down and study for hours straight. And I was like, well, I'm not really staying focused and I'm not retaining any of the information really. So I told you also that I felt like I first just want to give myself some time to exercise, get a good breakfast in, and just relax before I really sit down and do the work so that I can really stay focused for those 2 hours, 3 hours that I am working instead of feeling the pressure to sit down and study for 5 hours, but realistically also only really studying for two.
Yeah, and that's a great example of also setting balance boundaries. So you're going to take care of yourself, and then you're going to do what you have to do for school. And
Yeah.
it's a really good example of keeping that balance and keeping those boundaries in each respected area. Like, you set the boundary that you're going to do is for yourself, but you also set the boundary that you're going to study, and you fulfilled them.
Yeah.
And that's a good kind of like balance to kind of strive for.
I think so. And just like with everything else, what is a boundary for me doesn't necessarily mean that that's a boundary for somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, everybody works differently in that way, and some people are like, no, like I need to do homework first and then I can focus on this, or like me, I would like to work out first and then get to homework, or some people they prefer doing little chunks of work
Hmm.
and then have the rest of the day off, or other people are like, no, let's just finish everything in one day and then have an entire day off. So it really depends on what works for you and what fits into your schedule. And that also ties in again with the self-awareness of like, okay, what fits me, what fits my schedule, what fits my environment, and I guess it's kind of figuring out, playing around with that as well as like along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to continue on with, we've shoot. Okay. We've kind of gone through the first two steps. So obviously self-awareness, understanding those boundaries, and then learning to say no, learning when to say yes, the balance between them. But the only way for this to really set place, for you to feel balanced, for you to form a, I want to say less stressful life, but don't take that to heart. Clearly we have some issues ourselves, but is that
Who doesn't?
consistency. Yeah, no one's gonna get this perfect. And if you think you have this perfect, you might want to
I mean,
rethink,
we're also
because
still figuring it out, and
yeah,
we're continuously setting new boundaries and adjusting our boundaries as
yeah,
so.
and that's a great point actually. Before we get into the last kind of step of setting boundaries, is boundaries can move, boundaries can change,
Yeah,
boundaries are always evolving based on your environment, based on your lifestyle, based on your point in life. So don't think
yeah,
once you set a boundary that that's it, because they evolve, they move, they change.
just
What
like you
you,
do as a
yeah,
person.
yeah, and I think that's really important for someone to know, because we're saying, oh, set this, set this, set this, know this, know this, know this. However, you got to know this is, you're setting something for a period of time of which it suits you. And
Yeah,
then once you move on, once the next thing happens, whatever it might be, there's new boundaries that occur. Some disappear, new ones come in, some get evaluated. So I think it's very important to understand that.
yeah, especially also as you get older, just your entire environment continues to change. Um, this also ties in, I guess, with our previous episode of like your relationship changes, your friendships change, but also your work environment, your living environment. Maybe right now for school, like my boundaries are a little different because I need to study for certain tests. I need to pass
Hmm.
those tests. So I'll have a meeting at 7 p.m. to talk about stuff for school, but that doesn't mean that I will allow myself to do that when I have an actual job, because I wouldn't get paid for those hours that I would make outside of the workday.
Yeah,
So
and it's like some things are not going to go directly towards your boundaries. Like you're going to have those off things. You're going to have those off 7 p.m. meetings. You're going to have those off 6 a.m. whatever. Like things are going to occur.
yeah,
It's not set in stone, but the more set in stone they are, the better balanced you will be, knowing that you kind of gotta be malleable at certain times. You gotta give and take. Um,
yeah.
you
And
can't
that
just
ties
be,
in
this is it,
with
super concrete.
yeah, because life happens, like
Yeah.
unexpected things happen. Yeah, I was supposed to meet at 11:30 today, but things got switched around, so we met at 7 p.m. instead. I could be all cranky and upset that I have to use my nights to get a meeting in, but at the same time, it's like, well, it's for a better purpose. But that doesn't mean I will always have a meeting at 7 p.m. Um, and I guess that's kind of like the point that I think you wanted to talk about is that staying consistent
Mm.
with those boundaries. And that kind of ties in with what we talked about creating certain habits. Um, Habits are created because you repeat a certain thing over and over again. And that's the same with setting boundaries. You don't just set a boundary by one time saying, this is what I'm going to do, and then next week, don't do it anymore. That's not how you build boundaries. That's not how you set them. It's a matter of continuously staying true to that boundary or whatever it is that you told yourself that you're going to abide by. With the idea of, okay, some days I might have to fluctuate a little bit depending on the situation or the environment that I'm in that day. But on average, on a daily basis, I this is what I want to achieve, or this is my boundary that I want to abide by.
Yeah, I think no one. Can you hear me? My thing keeps turning
Yeah, I can
red.
hear you.
Okay. I don't know what red means on my microphone, so I think it's very important that I like what you said about the consistency, that you have to be super structured, but knowing that you may have to change
Yeah,
or at certain points, because consistency is you kind of strive for consistency. It sounds really boring, but in reality, if everything was chaos, you'd get overwhelmed, you'd shut down, you'd do whatever is a natural mechanism for your brain, for your body to just implode. So like that consistency, the routines, the habits, it's a good way to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, and all those other things. But also take care of yourself and not be manipulated, not be taken advantage. Because, like, to your example, you have a 7 p.m. meeting, that's not going to always happen. What when a boundary would be crossed is if that 7 p.m. meeting occurred every day.
yeah,
Then you're
because
like,
they know I
wait,
would be available.
yeah, um, because you said yes that one time. But if
Yeah,
you're saying no, 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 and then you occasionally say yes or whatever it might be, um, that's kind of like that change, that malleability, that adaptiveness that we're talking about. It's like, for example, this morning, I was not supposed to go into work till like 7:30, because I was responsible for a visit at 8:30, and I wanted to get in, just to get hours and do some admin stuff. However, I wake up same time Hunter did, 5:30, whatever. I was just doing stuff around the house, finishing up my presentation that I have to do. However, I got a text message from my coworker saying, "Hey, is there like a traffic accident on 70, or do you know why there's no one in lab this morning?" And I said, no, like, I don't think, I haven't heard of any major traffic accident that would keep people from coming in. I was
yeah,
like, what, like, who's there, like, whatever. And she was like, well, I have two visits going on, both under time restraint, and there's only one of me, and one of the visits she had never run before. So, me, not great with boundaries, because I actually felt bad for her, because this is nothing against her. Got ready in 10 minutes and was there in 15 altogether, because there was no one else there.
yeah.
That
But
has
that is
happened
also
more, well, that has happened more times than not, that you'll
oh.
that our bosses don't show up to work on time. They
Well,
expect
okay, yeah.
us to go
To
out
pick
on
up
our
the
time. They disrespect the GA's time. We don't get paid for the
yeah.
extra hours. Nothing. And they sit and don't come in until 7:30 or 8. That is an example because it has happened repetitively. Boundaries are
Yeah.
crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes it a lot difficult to really abide by those boundaries that you have set for yourself because you are also a person that feels bad for the people who are then being left alone. So it's like, well, I guess I'll pick up the slack.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna screw over someone who I get along with and it's not her fault.
Exactly.
But the time and
So,
time again that the GAs pick up the slack, our
yeah.
bosses are not getting called out. They're not getting yelled at. They're not getting in trouble. They're not getting reprimanded because the GAs who get paid pennies to the dollar, literally pennies to the dollar, pick up their ass, pick up their
Yeah.
slack.
But that is also one of the reasons why you told yourself, I'm done with this. I am leaving this situation as soon as I can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't change. Like if I was to really be like true to my boundary, I would not have gone in. I would have let her sink.
Yeah. But then that's
Let them
your
walk in
like
to a shit show.
good side of you telling yourself, but I can't because I don't want to be that I don't want this to be on that person who it's not their fault. It's also not my fault, but it's also not their fault and I know what I'm doing, so I guess I'll do it for her, you know?
Well, did I know what I was doing? Absolutely not, because likewise, I'd never run that visit, but that's okay. This is the way I kind of justify it. My boundary is I will let our superiors flounder as long as it's not at the expense of someone who I know does their job well.
Yeah.
Is that a great justification? Probably not. Is it the way I justified it? Yes. Was I already awake and in the process of getting ready, and all I had to do was get ready a little bit faster or a lot faster? Yeah. Did it really change my day? No. It's just extremely irritating that, you
Yeah.
know, in
Like
situations like that.
you didn't start the day as planned, which
One way to
can
say
cause
it. We
some
had blood running down
irritation.
people's arms. We had
Ah, wonderful.
bosses not show up on time. We couldn't remember
Yeah.
passwords
I
to
gotta
laptops.
love
It was a
that.
great time. Um, but no, it's in instances like that when it's the repetition of disrespect. That's when you really have to learn what your boundaries are and say, actually, I should say no to this, or actually,
Yeah.
maybe not this time. The one off, it's not that big of a deal. But
No.
definitely,
Like
if it's,
that's just part of daily life, I guess.
yeah, you have to
That
adjust.
certain thing happens and you gotta be able to adjust to that and work around it. And it's just the matter of having a consistent general idea of what it is that you expect from others and what you expect from yourself. My mom always told me, and I'm sure other moms around the world have told their kids the same thing. It's like you should treat someone and expect things from others that you would like others to expect from you and treat you in that way. Um, and I don't think that's what your bosses are doing by letting you pick up all the slack all the time. But like, if you were in that situation as your colleague, like, you would have liked if someone would have came and help you with that situation.
Exactly. It's like, I know, like, there's been times that her and I were like, okay, we're going to come in. I'm coming in late this morning because your visit is this, my visit's right after. But if you need help, I'm going to be awake. And then we flip flop, Friday, we
Yeah.
do the same thing. So it's quite common. Like we have kind of like we do it for each other. It's really boundary crossing when it's the superiors who didn't do their job because they just
Yeah.
didn't show up to work.
Yeah.
And there was zero communication that they weren't coming to work. Now, it is fully expected that they don't show up to work. We've known this. This has been month on top of month of thing. Um, but again, it's not expected. And,
Yeah.
I get up early. It's just who I am. So, like, I know I can be on call, and she knows that I am on call. I'm 15 ish, 12 ish minutes away. I can be there in, 15. So it's just one of those things, but the disrespect and the boundary crossing didn't come from her. It came from my bosses. And I think that's also we didn't really talk about it, but knowing when a boundary is crossed and making sure you are aware of what party is crossing that line so you don't take it
Yeah.
out on someone who did not cross your boundary.
That's a very important point because we tend to put our frustration or anger or whatever it is that you might be feeling towards someone who's it's really not their fault that this situation happened. It's what happens a lot in like customer service,
Mm-hmm.
I think, where people complain and complain to this person behind a desk. Well, that person has absolutely nothing to do with that complaint that they have, but yet they're being yelled at for no reason.
Oh, I got plenty of those stories.
Yeah, exactly. And one of my friends too, like she works at this clothing store in Rotterdam and she gets all these angry customers sometimes and she's like, "Well, I'm just here to sell the product. I don't know anything else besides that I need to sell it. So if you
Yeah,
have any questions or complaints, take it up with the manager, not me."
yeah.
Um so yeah, the yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's knowing who to say, like, knowing who to say no to, knowing who's chronically crossing those boundaries, knowing who to get frustrated with. Because if you're getting frustrated, like, if someone else is crossing your boundary or you're letting them cross your boundary and you're getting overwhelmed and irritated and taking it out on your significant other or on a friend or something like that, you're hurting that relationship when really, or those relationships when really this is the boss situation or the other party
Yeah.
situation is what needs to be evaluated, not your significant other or your family or whatever that it might be bleeding into. And you don't want to ruin those other relationships because your boundary was being crossed by a different individual or
And that's the thing
individuals.
too, like at some point you just got to evaluate and being like, "Hey, this has happened way too often. One time, sure. Two times, coincidental. Three times, I see a pattern." And if it happens way too often, at some point you gotta just be honest with yourself and ask yourself, do I want to stay in this situation? Do I Can I change anything about the situation? Is it within my control? Then take the steps towards changing that situation. But if it's really out of your control or you've tried everything to set that boundary, but it's being crossed over and over again, then it's might be time to consider taking a step away from that situation you're in.
Yeah, and obviously you do it always. All of this is done gradually, well thought out. It's a process. You should never jump to rash decisions about any of this. Um, because you could make a rash decision or you could make a rash thought and say, this is definitely the problem, when in reality, maybe it's not. Maybe that's just
Yeah.
something that's built on top of it, but that's not the root problem. So it's something you have to be patient with yourself with. It's a gradual, well thought out process, but in the end, It will help you navigate your life. It will help you nurture healthier relationships and prioritize your needs, and ultimately reduce stress,
Hopefully.
anxiety, whatever. Don't ask me, I don't know this word. um
Yeah, I
but
mean
that's
that's
in
the
theory. In
goal.
theory, that's the goal. And if
Yeah.
it's executed well, that's how it should end up. Obviously no one executes it perfectly, so you're gonna have good days and
No.
bad days.
Yeah, and just remember, as we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, is that the boundaries change as you change.
Hmm.
The boundaries adjust to whatever situation you're in. It could even be a boundary, living in an apartment complex versus living in a house. Like if you're living in an apartment, you have all these neighbors that are everywhere, and you need to have different boundaries for a kind of a group living like that. Um, Besides living in a house, where it's different, where you have your own space, where probably neighbors aren't as close to you. So it really depends on what environment, what situation you're in, and also ask yourself, like, that's one thing. It's like, is it worth it for the time that I'm in the situation?
Yeah.
Um, because we can complain a lot about classes and school as students, but thinking about it, it's like, well, it's only a few more months, and then we don't have to take these classes anymore. Um, And then people are like, you should enjoy your college career because after that, it's only work, work, work. And I'm like, well, at least I'm not working until 9 in the evening. So
Yeah.
it changes as you change, changes as you change. Wow, I am struggling with the language today. Um, and it changes as the environment and your situation changes also. And that is just part of self growth and self awareness and all the
No, that's
fun
very true.
topics that we're discussing here.
Oh yeah, so much fun. It all interconnects.
It really does. Because becoming more self aware is part of that self growth process, and becoming more self aware allows you to identify those certain boundaries and things that you want to set for yourself. So it's
Excuse
all
me.
connected in a way.
It is. All of it's interconnected, but it's, I think, whether it's social media, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's friends, we're no longer good at setting boundaries the way maybe we once were, because we're constantly being bombarded by things. I'm reading a new book and it gave me great insight. I really like the insight that it gave me yesterday. Let's see if I can find it again. Um, Essentially, it said conventional life advice, which is kind of what we're giving, is fixating on what you lack. It focuses on your shortcomings. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I really should follow that advice, chances are boundaries is something that you're lacking in. Um, Also, though, the main point is that the world is constantly telling us, or you, the path of a better life is more, just more. Buy more, own more, make more, be more. You're
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with these messages, whether it's social media, friends, family, workplace, any environment. Why? Because unfortunately, the more you care about everything and anything, it's better for business. Think about it. The more you buy, the more you make, the more it all revolves around money. However, the best advice is that caring about what's true and important to yourself rather than caring about everything. So in reality, caring less and setting those boundaries to what's true and important to you is what's really key.
Less is more.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, because I feel like, especially in this day and age, we lose a part of our identity. We forget who we are because we see all these things of what you should be, and we forget that everybody is their own person and everybody has their own interests. And I see all these people, just posting their lives on TikTok and getting, or Instagram, and just getting bombarded by all these negative comments. And I'm like, chill out, people. Like, that you don't like what they're doing doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Um, Unless it's certain types of crimes, but that's a whole other topic. But in general, everybody has the right to do whatever they want to do and live their life how they want to live their life. And that's why we also say, like, whatever happens or whatever works for me doesn't work for you, and vice versa. And really understanding what you need and what can benefit you as a person is what will get you one step ahead.
Yeah. I don't have
Yep.
anything to add to that.
Wow. Wonderful.
So I guess with that, we will go ahead and end this episode. So thank you for joining us as we offer a glimpse into the world of true friendship, where even though worlds may seem apart, the connections remain strong.
Thank you very much. And if you like this episode, please subscribe, like, comment, review, whatever it is you feel comfortable doing. Let us know what we can improve and what you want us to talk about next time. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye.